Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Billy Mann, and today I have the wonderful Natasha Swerdloff. Is that right? Okay. I had a little bit of practice on it. Natasha is a woman that I became aware of recently, well, around the time, it's a couple of years now, it says, since you released a book that you wrote, that smashing book, Coming Home with Dick and Bettinger. It's my kind of read. I love simple books. I love it when the message comes across so cleanly, and I at some stage, maybe during the conversation, we might talk about it. Let's talk about coming home. Let's say, for argument's sake, not that we're talking about it. But in the meantime, Natasha, thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. Introduce yourself. Tell the world what you're about for those that don't know you, because lots of people would be joining us today. They wouldn't be familiar with the principles, etc. They would be friends and people here in Ireland. And what you're up to, what you're about, and we'll go from there.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Billy. I'm really, really thrilled to be here
Delighted.
today. And well, what am I about? I started this journey of spiritual interest when I was a teenager. Really, I had some spiritual experiences at a very young age, like 5, 6, 7 years old, and I was always curious about what is that. And so that started my journey through self-help books, lots of different spiritual teachings and seminars and meditation practices. And I just kept feeling like there was something in psychology and spirituality that I couldn't find the bridge between the two. And so when I met the principals about 8 years ago, that's where I found the bridge. And it was an incredible meeting for me because it really just connected the dots. I'd been studying psychology, I'd been studying self-help and spirituality, and suddenly I could see how they met. Mm-hmm. So that became a new road for me, a new exploration into these principles and what they were. And of course, like many people, in the beginning, my mind was going crazy trying to figure this out. What are they? What are the steps? What is the method? What is the theory?
What's the 3-step formula for this piece of it?
Exactly. And then when I met Dickon in 2014 and started a mentorship with him, that was really when the dots really connected, and so much so that we decided to write a book about how we both saw life and the 3 principles. So that's been my work since then. Everything that I do today is informed by the way that I see life through these 3 principles. And I work in businesses about maybe 50 or 60% of the time. And the rest of the time I travel around the world. I do workshops, seminars, talks at conferences, and one-to-one coachings, mainly online, because I have people from all over the world. So that's what I'm up to.
Isn't that the joy of modern communication? Isn't that the joy? It is. It's incredible. I was laughing last week when I had Nicola Bird on from the UK, and I had Del on from California, from Malibu, and then I went to Jerusalem with Hannah, and it's incredible. And you in Holland, and I mean, cripes, like, it makes the world so small.
Yeah,
it makes the world so small.
I'm in Denmark, by the way.
Oh, sorry, my apologies, Denmark. Sorry.
Yeah, I live in.
I can hear you now. It's just broken. Denmark. Okay, Denmark, which are next door neighbours. But of course, it could be the same as, you know what I mean? They're 2 different countries. We had Dickon on a couple of weeks ago. Oh my God, like he fried the circuits, off of everybody, because I think he was just coming out of COVID, and he was raring to go, and it was marvelous. And I can only imagine, the experience of writing a book or even working with Dickon over a protracted period of time must be like bathing in love all the time.
Yep. And a lot of laughter, because we were really just sometimes rolling around with laughter. Love and laughter, it's pretty much his middle name.
Isn't that fantastic? So we'll say prior to, stumbling, just as a bit of a context in the conversation, like from your bio, leadership and managerial and that type of stuff, in the search for something, You know, I'm just curious because I just, as a context of before and after in it, you know, what was the experience like? We'll say in relation to work, etc., and the communication with, we'll say, leadership and stuff. I'm just literally following the train of thought here with this. You know, to the context of it, how it informs, you know, where you were informing in that area, and how the shifting happened, and how it's informing your work now, we'll say, across the board.
Yeah. Well, leadership and workplaces in general are always interested in more efficiency, improvement in communication, improvement in collaboration. These are the things that they're looking for. And so the titles of my seminars are pretty much the same now as they were then. But before the three principles, it was all technique based. It was all, well, how do I communicate with my coworkers? How do I speak with leaders? Or if it was leadership, how do I speak with my employees? So it was always techniques and theories. And now I point simply to where everything comes from. So rather than giving them techniques, I point them directly to where creativity comes from. Where does collaboration come from? Where does love in the work context come from? Now, I don't often use the word love, although that will come up at some point in a training. But I start speaking about how we can understand, for instance, separate realities, how we can start to understand moods and what that does to communication. And so before I would teach them communication models, now I say, well, if you're in a low mood, don't communicate. You know, it's not going to go well. And if you're in a high mood, that's the time to communicate. And when you're in a high mood, you don't need a model. When you're in a low mood, no model's going to help you, because you can always hear people in a low mood. You can see their body language. You can hear in their voice that they're not in a good space. And almost wherever you are, that can seem to bring you down. So I really point to where everything comes from, and that's completely different. And the wonderful thing is that the kind of effects that it's having out in companies is amazing. I mean, I had a successful business before the three principles, but I'm just seeing now that the way they thrive is beyond anything I was able to make happen at that time. Now I don't have to make anything happen. Now I simply show them where everything is from, where everything comes from, and they themselves grow from there. So it's a completely new way.
Isn't that a very subtle shift? You know, it's enormous, and it's in the, we'll say, the downstream of it, for the want of a better description, and how it shows up in the world, where the responsibility of producing something in the sense of results, you know, creates a whole raft of thinking.
Oh, it's so different for me, because I really felt, just like you said, it was on my shoulders for them to have success. And now I see that I don't have to do a thing. I just point them to where their success lies, and then they make it happen, which is it's much cooler, and it's much easier for me too.
It is, yeah, because you're back to that easy flow. You know, the art of real communication.
Yeah, it's an easy flow. I don't have as much preparation as I used to have. It's more fun. You know, I enjoy myself with people. I literally, if I do a 2-day training with the group, which I just did, literally have fun for 2 days.
You
and
broke
very
up a
much
small
like
bit,
your
Natasha.
conversation,
Natasha, you just broke up there just when you were starting to talk about the group, the 2 days. I lost you there for a sec.
All right. So when I was together with this group for 2 days last week, I literally just had fun with them. And very much in the same way as you are responsive to me in our conversation, I was simply responsive to them. So I had some things that I wanted to point out to them, but very much of the training was simply that we had a conversation that evolved from what they were seeing and what they wanted. So it was so alive and felt very meaningful to everyone.
Isn't that a very interesting dynamic? You know, shortly before all this was shut down, you know, I was invited into a training college to have, there was a number of talks given on mental health. It was a mental health awareness week for everybody in the college, and it's a third level. And one of the students was a former client of mine, so she said, I have this guy, he's great, can we invite him in? And she said, yeah, no bother. So I went in, and I wound up actually working with special needs assistants, and I would say carers, advanced carers, not just, making tea, but those who would care for people who are physically handicapped, etc., but wouldn't be nurses. And kind of when I was told that this was going to be my audience inside, like that I was going to have approximately 45 to 50 people in the room, they asked me what I was going to talk about, what would I present, and whatever like that. And I had to tell them, I actually don't know. I don't know, but, and I couldn't go in and say, I'm going to do this, this, this. I said, if you put him in a room, the only request I have is you put him in a circle if the room is big enough. And that's all I want. And I remember, I think it was Mavis Kern's poem, Is It the Secret? And when I arrived in, I handed it to reception. I said, will you print out 50 of those? And so I can have them and I'll hand them out. And that's the only thing I did. And we went in and we sat down. And I literally just let it happen inside in the room. And it's kind of hard to explain that to people who are used to structure and used to that the real juice in this is actually slowing everything down, not actually blowing everything up. And I wound up having, for the second hour of it, teachers and kids from standing in around. So the texts, obviously some texts had gone out. So I started with about 50 and I wound up with about 80, including some of the teachers standing around the back. And all we did was sat there and had a conversation. Mm. And invariably the conversation wound up about love. Mm. No, I didn't take the conversation there, because we spoke about the special needs, understanding that kids with special needs at school still operate the same way as everybody else. There is actually no difference. It's just that how they process the information, and we had a conversation, and it was so gentle, and we just walked our way through it. No, I have no prior experience working with special needs assistants, and no prior experience working with the people who are in the advanced training of caring and stuff like that. But it didn't matter.
Isn't that beautiful?
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah. I mean, people are people. It's interesting because the more that I share what I know about the principles, the more I see beyond the exterior, beyond the surface level, that we're all the same. It looks as if, oh, this is a special need person. This is a lawyer. This is a CEO. And people get so caught up in their thinking about these different titles or roles. And really what we're pointing to is what's universal, what's true for all of us, what's on the deep level. Mm-hmm. And if we get caught up in the surface level, then we're going to get caught up in our thinking about, oh, I'm speaking to a CEO. Should I wear a tie? Should I, what, they must be very special and very,
yeah.
No, they're human beings. They are lived by the three principles, just like everyone else. So it really makes life and work so much easier when we can see what's beyond the surface.
You see, that's the trick, isn't it? Is when you dismantle your own thinking, that every human being experiences life. And this is, I could say, part of this overarching principle of this whole project was that we knew, and I'm beginning to realize, even from my own circumstances that we spoke about a while ago with the closing of the business, that a lot of people are now exiting into an entirely different world. And it's probably more important now than it actually was at the start of all of this, because people are now not emerging back into what they created as a life prior to this, but now it is a new reality. And the joy of actually being able to like I see, part of this overarching principle is, no matter how far you appear to be gone within yourself, no matter how far it seems you've gone, there's always way back.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter.
No. And once you've touched that space inside, it's there. And so it might, it might feel like it's gone for a moment. It might be veiled by your thinking, your worried thinking, for instance. But just underneath that thinking is your home, is your true self. It's waiting for you right there. It never leaves anywhere. In fact, it's always there, and it's the only thing we can rely on. And right now, when so many things seem uncertain on the outside, in that, on that surface level, well, what can we rely on? Where can we go to find the peace that's always there beyond the surface level? Well, we just have to look within. It's right there.
It's lovely. Like I said, it's easy to, and we all get lost. We just, it's the dance between, understanding and just getting swept up in our own thinking. It's such a wonderfully human thing to do.
It is, and we all do it. We all forget, and then we remember, and then we forget.
Yeah. I'm for me, and like I say earlier on when we were talking, the realization of the big decision that has to be made, that the arc of this decision, for me, one of the things I learned that it's actually okay to make the decisions.
Yeah.
And make big decisions.
Yeah. And it sounds to me like you actually knew this decision 2 years ago. You just
for me, it appeared like that, and it did truthfully, that this had moved on. I just hadn't caught up.
Yeah.
This had moved on. I just hadn't caught up, and that's entirely fine, because when I caught up, it came like that, and it's. I suppose, and I'm going to borrow the title of your book, and I'd love you to talk about that. There is a coming home to it. That, for me personally, from my own experience, that there was some choppy waters. Like I say, when I arrived in there this morning, it was an entirely different experience to come in and start dismantling something that you built over 28 years. And there's a lot of feelings and a lot of grieving sometimes can appear, but it was the acknowledgement of it, that it was okay, and then we just said, well, this is perfectly fine. Whatever is showing up for me now shows up as a sense of loss.
Yeah.
Really, at the end of the day, my life has always been about the people. So it's the people more than anything else that bugged me, that I wouldn't have the same contact with those people, But other than that, within 5 minutes of being through the door, it was just all finding its own way back down.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're using the metaphor of the choppy waters. On the surface level, it certainly can seem very choppy. But then when you sink in, you said after 5 minutes, you kind of sink in and you go a bit below the surface level, and you sink into that knowing this is the right decision. Yes, there's choppy waters. Yes, it's difficult and sad in many ways, but I know. And it's a knowing that's not from the intellect, it's a knowing that's from within, and you just know it's right. And I believe that this knowing is what's guiding us throughout our entire life. All of us have this knowing inside, and we sometimes listen, sometimes we don't. And at some point, the knowing becomes so strong that we know to stop what we're doing or leave a relationship or go into a relationship, move homes or move countries. There's a knowing that guides us constantly, and we can rely on this knowing. This knowing is within. It's in the home that we know when we're there. We know what to do. And if we don't, then it's probably not time to move.
Would you speak to that? We'd say what you refer to as the knowing. There's look, it's referred to as wisdom, it's referred to as common sense. There's a million different words for it.
Yeah,
it's a million different words for it. It's the same. But I'm curious to just to hear what your understanding of it is, how it transmits through you, we'll say, for argument's sake.
Well, there's a couple of, if I call it traits, traits is kind of the wrong word for it, but because what it is, it's formless. It's a knowing that's formless. let's take, you spoke about love before. Well, how do we know that we love someone? How do we know? Is it a list? Like, I love my husband because, I love
Yeah.
my wife because? No, right? How do I know that it's time to get up and change my life circumstances? There's a knowing. We can think, like there can be a thinking, oh, I should close my shop because I can't afford it. It can be all this. And very often when it's the conceptual mind, or ego as we could call it, that makes that kind of decision, there's pros and cons, and it's complicated, and we have to find the numbers. But then there's the knowing of what's right. And the knowing doesn't have anything to do with numbers. It's something beyond our intellect. It's something beyond the word. It's just a knowing of what's true. And very often I say to people, if they don't have that knowing, don't go. If you don't know, don't go.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. Yeah, if you don't know, don't go. Yeah.
And when to go, you'll know.
Mm.
Right? Because that knowing has been guiding us throughout our life. We couldn't get from A to B without it, but we don't notice it because it's underneath the surface. We get so focused on what's on the surface level,
Yeah.
right? Because it's moving and it seems important, and it's like an alarm going off constantly, and so that takes our attention to the surface. And so we really need to quiet down to be able to sense, oh, there's something beyond that. There's something guiding me. And it's not a voice in the head. And another trait, if we're going to call it traits, is that it never comes up with, well, Billy, you could have your salon open, or you could close it. No, it's not like that. The guidance that comes with knowing only has one solution, and you know what it is. So often when I speak to people, they'll tell me about a relationship that's not working very well. And I often say to them, what do you know in your heart? And people always know, but then the intellect says, no, you shouldn't leave him because, or you should leave him because. And that's just the intellect. If I go to, what do you know in your heart? People know.
When you add the word because,
Yeah. That's always going to be bad.
you're screwed after that, really. You are, and I was talking with a client about this in the subject of judgment. Because we were just having and they said something, so I started challenging the conversation all the way down, and we reduced it to judgment. And she said to me, well, what does that mean? I said, what I've done is I've taken it in reverse for you, because I said the moment that you entered under any level of judgment, any thought of judgment, regardless of what it is, everything else is just content.
Yeah.
Because.
Yeah.
And the machinery will make up a limitless amount of reasons.
Yeah, the word because and the word but.
But.
Well, I know what's in my heart, but, right?
Yeah.
And I usually say, I don't care about your buts. Let's talk about what you know.
Yeah.
And let's go back to that again and again, so it becomes so strong that all the buts fall away. You see, the more we come home, the more we are alive in ourselves, the more we're true to ourselves, the more all those buts and becauses, they dissolve. Because in the light of who we truly are, they can't exist. So the more home we are, the more we are just here now, the more everything else dissolves, and we're guided by this inner wisdom, this inner knowing more of the time, and life becomes easier, and you're more connected to the joy and aliveness that is right here, right now, always.
Isn't it? I spoke a little bit yesterday evening about the nature of suffering. That how it prolongs when we're not making the decision, or that there's an enormous difference between pain and suffering, and pain often comes from the moment we have to make a decision. But being present to that decision.
Mm.
And I think this is what you're pointing to, and I'd love to hear your understanding of this. But as I I'm putting the word "but" in there because I'm sneaking that one in there because I can, because it's my show, because I'm using the word "but." But what I'm saying is that for me, it's not always necessarily warm and fluffy, but there is a depth of understanding there that when you're in the midst of whatever that painful, it's the right thing to do, because the recognition of suffering is when you're not making the decision, you're not present, because you're caught in the what ifs and the buts and the becauses of all of that.
Mm.
That presence really is the key.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, it's making the decision about closing your salon. Of course, that's not warm and fluffy.
No.
But there's a knowing that it's true.
Yes.
There's knowing that it's right. And then comes all the sadness of, all the customers through the years and your co-workers and so on and so forth. I mean, that's not warm and fluffy. That's being human. Right? So to me, the beingness is the constant in our life. It's the knowing. It's the depth that you were talking about. And then the human part is all the surface level stuff, which is part of life. It's saying goodbye. It's closing down. It's opening new doors. It's meeting new people. It's just life is a contact sport, right? So so yeah, I agree, and thank you for reminding me. It's not all warm and fluffy always. There's decisions that has to be made that are difficult.
Yeah, it's that has been perhaps one of the like I said to you earlier on, it's actually okay to make the decision.
Yeah,
it is okay to make the decision. It's not necessarily an easy decision to make sometimes, and look, if it, to me, as it occurs to me as I'm talking to you, it is about relationships, really, fundamentally with myself, but then the outward ripple of that, and sometimes that relationship isn't healthy. But it was one of those lessons, and I've learned an enormous amount in these last number of months, from talking to everybody. But Dominic Scafidi said something to me very early on in the middle of all of this, and he said that we create a life, and then we wake up every morning and we recreate it, and we make an effort to keep recreating the same thing over and over. And I just go, wow.
And another way of saying that is that we're not actually doing the creating, are we?
No.
Creation is creating.
Yeah.
We're part of that creation. So everything is being created from moment to moment, our entire life, our bodies, our thoughts and feelings and sensations and perceptions. It's all created from moment to moment. And seeing that is so freeing, because I'm not the one doing it. There's an intelligence behind all of life that's doing all of that, which frees me up to just be in harmony with life and go with the movement.
This is very subtle again, and I love you bringing it up, because when you said to me, one of the things that when I fell into the principles, was about trying to manage my life again, trying to get a hold on it, because it was a shit experience. I had bottomed out, and when I came across the principles, the impact was, wow, things started to settle down, and what I should say this to you, because I'm starting to think about it too much now. No, I've lost my train of thought. Isn't that just lovely?
Yeah.
This is what I love about this. It's so completely random that sometimes this stuff can happen.
But I think if there's something that people might find useful in these times, it is to see that where we find the safety, the security, the grounding that we're looking for, it's not out there.
Yes.
If we look out there, it's going to look really choppy, the waters.
Yes.
Right. So
Thank you.
turning around and looking within is where knowing is where we are guided, is where there's this peace that never leaves us. It's
Yes.
just underneath the surface level.
It's there all the time, you know. And for me, I was saying to you when I was sitting here yesterday morning, and I had a cup of tea back in hand, and after all of the it was truly overwhelming.
Mm.
I mean, really and truly, Natasha, I just like, you know, the wave, the messages, my phone was ringing. Eventually, I just had to put down my phone and walk away for almost 12 hours because my phone was dinging and binging all the time. And then, you know, I had all of that, and I was thinking, oh God, Jesus, have I done the right thing? And, you know, and suddenly, you know, and I could, because I was swept up in it. But then when I sat down and I was starting on the call, and I had a cup of tea in my hand, and I was looking out here again, just at my garden and knowing what was ahead of me, and the feeling, just, I got reminded in that moment, just like that.
Yeah.
This is the feeling of life.
Yes. That's the feeling of home.
It's the feeling of home. In a nanosecond, I realized, you know, and through all of it, but funny underneath all of that, you know, and I never lost sight of it. You know, I never lost sight of it. Because there's something, there is an essence to this. And I will pull it back to being present again, if you don't mind me bringing it around this way again. That I was actually present to all of it. You know, that I was aware of the highs and lows as they played out.
Yeah.
And that for me, I think perhaps one of the greatest lessons that I learned with all of this into principles and stuff was, this is not me. You know, that this event is not me. This, you know, whatever's unfolding is not me. And this is the point actually I was coming to, and it's more brought its way around again, is that life is unfolding all of the time.
Yes.
It's not something that we have done to deserve, or that doesn't exist. And I've already had a conversation with somebody, you know, about this over the weekend, and we spoke about this, that we're not in a good place, totally in the circumstances, with totally nothing of their doing. And she was saying, what did I do to deserve this? And I said, you did nothing. As a matter of fact, everything that you did was right. And as everything unfolded, you responded to every bit of that beautifully.
Yeah.
Now, what's happening is nothing of your doing.
Yeah.
At all. You have no responsibility for any of this. And it's not life is giving you this because you deserve a slap. It doesn't work that way.
No.
Life is unfolding, and the difference is we're either unfolding with it or we're banging against it.
Exactly. And you fight against it, and then you have suffering.
You have suffering.
When you see it as being absolutely right, then you don't suffer.
No. And it's easier to, so easy to be flexible around it. And knowing that, you know, I mean, I knew, like, once this decision was made and that it would go public and whatever, that I knew that I'd have moments where that it would happen. That it would happen. But like I say, that fundamental lesson of it's an impersonal unfolding. The world is an impersonal unfolding. It just unfolds as it is. And it's not something that I've done, you know, and I've deserved. It's not a reflection of me as a human in any shape or form.
No, there's no God saying, you must, you know, suffer, and you, this I'm going to close your salon. It's not how it works.
It doesn't work that way, sure, it doesn't.
No.
No, you know, and when we'd say, people would ask that innocent question of, how do you access it? You know, do you access to, you know, how do you access your wisdom and this, that, and the religion? It's not about access. There is no access key to this.
It's who you are.
It's who you are. And then, but how do you know? And I'd say it happens for me when I recognize the moment that I'm in. That's it.
Yeah.
That this is exactly the moment as it is, not as who I am, but as it is.
Yes.
And I am in this moment, as opposed to it being the other way around, and I can try to control it or bend it. But I'm with the unfolding as it is.
Yes. Beautiful. That's it, right there.
This is right there, you know, and there's no access key. It's just a kind of, well, this is exactly what it is.
Yes.
And that is a really, like I said, this last number of months, and particularly this last couple of weeks, and it was funny. I was having a conversation with a client yesterday, and she spoke about introducing somebody to the principles a number of years ago, and it all fell away. And then recently, Island of Knowledge turned up in their house somewhere. She'd obviously purchased it years ago, and her mom had just an epiphany reading it. She handed it to my client and said, all the answers that you need are in that book. I know nothing about the principles or anything. Like, she just read, and it just, you know, and her whole, she's lost all this weight and she's very happy and she's very content. And my client was kind of, but why her? You know, why not me? You know, I've been around this for ages. And what I discovered in the conversation was that the more I unpicked all of it, what I discovered was, we uncovered, as it were, was the fact that as soon as her mother recognized what was going on, she trusted it.
Mm. Yeah.
That was it, just the trust in it.
Yeah.
That it's actually, this is instantaneously, she saw it and she said, I can trust this. I know this, you know. Whereas my client had whatever stuff that she had got going on. And I would be looking at her, you know, and I'd say, but that's exactly what we're talking about. But what happened was she did, as it were, didn't believe it. There was a belief in it that it had to be something else, or it had to be. And I was saying, but it's actually the fact that you're not trusting it is the recognition that the intellect is still at play here. Because there's a fundamental shift, or I wouldn't say fundamental, foundational shift, perhaps. Like you point out, that you shift from whatever it is that's going on for you to knowing that you're actually being carried. You're actually just along for the ride. And it took me, I would have to say, a while to understand that you can trust that. That can be trusted. Like you say, there is only one answer. And it's funny how it shows up, and it's funny how in people's lives, and this was the subject of judgment as well. It came up in this conversation as well, as soon as we create a level of judgment about it, or the comparison. Well, why did she get it and I didn't get it? And I'm at it 5 years or whatever like that. Or about it, except that's it. Every answer you will ever need is inside between those two covers. And like that's gone.
Yeah, that book, Quering's book, is beautiful.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
If people don't know it, The Island of Knowledge by Linda Quering.
I'll actually put it up. I'll put the link up. I'll put the Amazon link up to it afterwards. Yeah, it is a really good book, you know, and it's actually one of the things I love about, we'll say, essentially the principles community, and the same with your book, is that I lost interest in reading a huge amount of stuff after a while, because I found it very wordy, and I found it complicated and formulaic, and a lot of these spiritual books, and I dropped away from a lot of that, Natasha, you know, and I dropped away from reading and books on leadership, and you know, and you'd be taking all this stuff on board, and you know, I just went, fuck, don't want that stuff. But there is, within the principles community, there is almost a desire to lessen the word rather than, and the books are very easy to read. I can say your book is really beautiful. Yourself and Deacon laid out so simply, and there's a lovely journey to understanding in it. And I love that within the principles community. I love the fact there is a desire to simplify everything.
Yeah. And it doesn't get more simple than trust your knowing. You know, if it comes up with the intellect going, well, but because blah 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 blah, it's not your knowing. Trust your knowing. And
Yeah, that's, isn't it simplicity? I suspect that has come up, I'd say, quite a share, I'd imagine in the corporate job, where the formulas,
yeah,
you know. I imagine, it's another pointer, isn't it, actually, really? It's another signpost that the more complicated you're making it.
if it isn't easy, it probably isn't right, you know.
Isn't that interesting?
There's such a simplicity with knowing, with truth, that if it's complicated, it's probably not truth.
Yeah. There is a clarity to this, I suppose we have used an enormous amount of words here, I suppose, in one sense, because as I would see it, somebody's, like I said to you earlier, something is going to hear something in their language.
Mm.
Somebody's going to hear something in their language and how the message gets through. And I suppose the best way to describe it is through metaphors, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
The use of a good story.
Yes, because we can't explain the formless with words. We can point towards it beyond the word, but through stories, and people can sometimes hear a story and, oh, I got it. It's not the story as such, it's where it's pointing upstream.
Yeah, Hannah Studley was saying that she's just releasing her first book, and she's turned it into a novel, as in a story, rather than we'd say like yourself and Dickin, or Mike O'Neill, or when it's written in first person ourselves or whatever, but where she's actually created. I'm really looking forward to seeing where she's going to go with this, because it's painless. It's about dealing with people, dealing with pain, but she's writing a story.
Mm.
And it occurred to me, well, Aesop figured it out, because like the truth has been passed down through the Aesop's fables for millennia.
Yeah.
And it's the timeless nature of this.
Yeah.
The pointing to this is nothing new. I suppose is the best way of describing it, isn't it?
Yeah. I imagine around campfires, through the ages and through different cultures, people have been sitting around campfires and sharing stories and letting the wisdom of the age from one generation to another generation through these storytelling sessions. And that's what I love about this. There's something very universal about sharing stories and let those carry the wisdom through to the next generation.
Yeah, there's a hearing in it, isn't there? That in the story, the wisdom is there. Is it? I think it was Sid that spoke about it, wasn't it? About the big kahuna. In my mind, when I hear the big kahuna, it's like the big kahuna burger. The conversation that appeared in Pulp Fiction. But Sid is talking about it, and he says the kahuna is the keeper of the secret that cannot be told.
Mm.
And they communicate through their, I suppose in this instance, Ho'oponopono, which is essentially another version of the spirit within or whatever. But this is how they pass the secret on, was through these stories. And the kahuna is the keeper of that story and tells the story. And it's so powerful, that the stories last. But yes. Truth lasts.
Yeah, there's a universal truth in many stories that we can all recognize, and they can help us see more deeply into our own nature.
I suppose it's the story. I suppose, do we think in stories? I don't know. But always, for me, I mean, if you look at even the fables, the Hans Christian Andersen, or any of these stories, they all carried that element in them of the greater good.
Mm.
You know, and I suppose when this is another thing, the obviousness of it when you see it.
Yeah, because truth, we all recognize truth when we hear it. It resonates deep within us. Often when people try and push truth down over their heads, they will, resist it. But when we just point, either through a story, through our own recognition of something, or just by the change that has happened with us through this understanding, people see that, people respond to that. They go, what happened to you? You've changed. What's going on there?
Mm.
Instead of us, being these big crusaders running out saying, you must read these books about the three principles, right? They'll change your life. Well, most people, they go, oh, what? I don't want to, don't push anything over me.
Yeah.
But if we become the change that we want to see in the world, so to speak, we become that light. We become a lighthouse for people around us, and they start noticing and get curious. What's going on there? What are you seeing? I want some of that. So I think the best way we can be of service is to be that change.
Yeah, people can see it.
Yes.
You know, I can say it's the obviousness of it. And, when I started listening to the earlier Sid audios and stuff like that, and it's all around you. I mean, it's all around me.
Yeah.
You know, and I was trying to concept it. You know, but when you look, everything is from exactly the same source. You know, it still unfolds from within regardless.
Yes.
And until I could see that what he was pointing to was the whole experience is around me. Of course it is, because it's in here.
Yeah.
And there's like moments I was coming down in the car from the salon while ago with my son in the car, and we'd been chatting, and he was sitting back, and we were talking about bleaching his hair. Again, now that he's off school, he's having a bit of fun with it. And we went silent, and I remember coming into the neighbouring town and having a moment where it all just went like that. And I could almost see the entirety of the story, for the want of a better description. And I could see the whole experience actually unfolding. And I go, yeah, wow, that's what it is. It's just the story collapses. There is. When I had, we'll say, the first major shift in my understanding was with my nephew. And it was a conversation one evening when I saw him putting his whole world together, and he was having to do this and having to do this, and because he was this kind of guy, he had to do it this way. It all up. But it was funny that I could see it in him, but for a long time I couldn't see it in myself. I could see it all, in here, but when I saw the collapse of the story for myself. The destination, I'm here, so I want to be enlightened. I am this, so I need to do this, and there's point A to point B, and it's so many subtle ways. But there is no B. But more importantly, there is no A. It's just all one story. It's all, to me, it appears as just one thought. The thought of Billy, whatever form that's taking.
Yeah.
And there's such a huge relief in that.
Life is unfolding right now.
Yeah.
And we can either resist it, or we can be really curious and see what's the next chapter. I'm really curious to see what's going to be your next chapter, Billy.
Me too. Me too, Natasha. Honest to God, I genuinely am. I mean, it's the unusual juxtapose of that grief, of this is part of my life and has been a major part. And I will always say the best education I got in life over 35 years was working with women.
Mm.
Because they softened off the edges.
Mm.
And I could see how women really, the connection, the maternal instinct, the nurturing, and the ability to support each other.
Mm.
Exposed me to that more than it did, and it was a marvelous lesson for me. And like, even though I won't have that constant daily contact, like I did inside in the salon, they taught me so much.
Mm.
And I have extraordinary friendships built up over that period of time. So when change comes, there's an inevitability that there is grieving and loss and, you know, the feelings of sadness and all that. That's there. But oh my God, I can't doubt myself. Like, what's happening now? And there is a sense of, I just don't care. In that, because I know, like I say, when we're on that ride, that whatever's unfolding, I'm actually going to be okay with it.
Yeah.
That's a peaceful night's sleep, Natasha.
It is. You are already okay, and you will continue to be okay no matter what happens.
You know, it's a peaceful night's sleep. And I've noticed in the last number of months, I am sleeping so well.
Yeah.
And I find myself actually needing less sleep.
Mm.
I just sleep so deeply for whatever period of time. I wake up and that's it. I put my boots on the floor. There's no straggling to kind of, well, I won't I? And it's funny how you noticed the change. You were saying about you've changed. You know what I noticed a lot that changed me. It's only very recently I've noticed it. Driving my car. I know we use it's a metaphor, you know, when you get cut off, you know, and you honk your horn and it's all their fault and this, that, and the other. But actually the behavior of driving my car has changed completely.
Mm.
And to the point like that even my wife has remarked on it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, 100 kph is the speed limit, but that's for other people.
Mm.
You know, I came driving like a lunatic. That stopped.
Yeah.
And I was inside in the car one day, and it was about 1 to 6 weeks, you know, I wondered, you know, so it was going on. But I even realized that I was putting on my limiter to 100 kph, and I was just sitting inside in the car driving. The hurry just disappeared.
Nice.
You know, and all of those little signposts were all pointing me in this, the urgency is gone.
Mm.
You know, and I think that's lovely. You know, as I say this, and even though it was supposed to be you doing the talking, for some reason, thank you. I appreciate you letting me have have a little bit of ear space today. I don't know why. Thank you, Natasha. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. Thank you.
It was wonderful speaking with you, Billy.
You know, thank you, Natasha. I really appreciate what you've just done there. I really appreciate that. It means a lot, actually, because it's usually the other way around. And like I said to you, it's talking. I'm happy to, but I appreciate the fact that you've made space for me to talk today.
My pleasure.
It means a lot. It means a lot. Thank you so much. And like I say, we're 55 minutes in. Like I say, we half an hour is a miserable failure now, thankfully and joyfully, you know. But I don't want to change it just in case somebody says I've only got a half an hour, you know, when I send out the invite. But that's fine, you know. But everybody is. Natasha, if people are looking for you, where would they find you? If they wanted to connect with you, if they wanted to communicate with you, how would they locate you?
My website is called theprinciplesinstitute.com. So www.theprinciplesinstitute.com, and it has information about me, what I offer of services, and also upcoming seminars, which many of them have changed now, so I'll have to update that list. But that's where they can find me, and of course through the book Coming Home, which you can find on Amazon with Dick and Betty.
and I'll say it again to anybody that's listening to this, it's so well worth getting it. I really loved reading it.
Thank
You
you
know,
so
hand in hand, it really was like, now I understand the other part of the book, and I put it to it this way, because I've known Dickon and I've been aware of Dickon for a long time. You know, but I'm honest, I'm going to go and take it out and I'm going to read it again now that I've had this conversation with you. I suspect reading the book for me is going to be a brand new experience again. A brand new experience again. Hold on a sec for me now. And I'm going to say good luck to everybody, and we'll meet you on the other side. To everybody else, thank you all for being so patient with me as well today, even though I kind of sucked a little bit of air out of Natasha's time. I greatly appreciate everybody joining me today. It's been a wonderful conversation for me, Natasha, and I appreciate the space you gave me today, because it seems this is what showed up for me today. And this is, like I say at the start of this, I don't plan this. I like to see what unfolds. I appreciate the fact that you gave me the grace of allowing me to do that bit of speaking today. It means a lot to me. To everybody else, I have a particular, a lovely surprise that on Thursday evening, Chip Chipman and his wife Jan are going to join us, and I was very moved by their keynote at the end of the 3P UK. I could not believe my luck when I opened my email last week and they were confirming that they were coming on, and it's been just, it's amazing that you find the time, Natasha and Janet, you know, and the people have found the time to come on and share this. It is very touching. And to everybody, I look forward to seeing you all again on Thursday evening and join us with Chip and Jan Chipman. In the meantime, be well, be at peace with your life, and as it were, go with the flow. Bye for now.